Welcome to episode 263 of the Shared Security Show. And joining me this week are my award-winning co-hosts, Scott Wright and Kevin Johnson. Congratulations
but all
on
I
your
got was a
award.
participation trophy.
The major
awesome.
award.
How did you know I won an award?
It's fragile.
It is fragile. Yes, it's Italian for fragile. But no, you guys are my award-winning co-hosts. And the reason I say that is because you have been on several lists of top 10 podcasts, top 30 cybersecurity podcasts. So in my eyes, that is an award. And it's a major award for you both.
It's an achievement anyway, if it's not an award.
Sure. But it's also a major award for you. Like you say,
yeah, me too,
you both.
But
like,
sure.
We got the award and we're like, forget that guy. It's just Tom.
It's like the guys on the bench, at the Super Bowl, right?
Yes. No.
Man, I don't know.
What, the B team, the B squad?
I bet you the guys on the bench at the Super Bowl still make enough money from being at the Super Bowl.
Oh, they do. I'm sure it's
or they're making a lot of money. You don't worry about that. But
we're not worried about them.
Yes, but we do have a great show for everyone today. And first, we're going to talk about password managers are still under attack, like from various angles. And this is really all started since the LastPass breach and controversy, and how everyone and their mother hopefully is moving on from LastPass. And we've talked about that on the show. Some very good reasons to move away from that password manager, which we won't go into in this episode. But there's two stories in particular that relate to this. There have been malicious Google ads are being found that are attempting to phish and social engineer people looking for different password managers like 1Password or Bitwarden. So this is a big problem that Google is trying to deal with, which is called malvertising, right?
Yeah, it's been around for a while.
I got a kick out of the one that was Bitwarden, W-E-R-D.
They misspelled it? Yeah. So my personal take is, well, first of all, why are you still using Google as your search engine?
You should be using ChatGPT to search things.
Yes, use that. Or you should be using DuckDuckGo or StartPage, one of the non-advertising related search engines. But anyway.
I still use Google for search because I enjoy the little doodles.
You do. And Kevin, I will say that you also like getting ads.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So for you,
okay.
It works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is that issue, right? People are being phished in their attempt to look for new password managers. But also there was an issue with KeePass recently where there was a vulnerability that was found in the configuration file, essentially. Mm-hmm. So someone found a way to inject malicious code into the config file, which could potentially decrypt and then push the contents of your database unencrypted over to a malicious actor. They are coming back saying that this isn't a big deal, guys, because once someone has access to your system, it's game over. The ye old argument, right?
Key logging
for a long time. And then other security professionals are saying, well, it's still an issue and y'all need to fix that.
I think it's personally, I think this one's interesting. Not trying to pimp my company's blog, but Mick just did a blog post about a CVE that was submitted.
Yeah.
The vendor actually said, okay, fine, we'll release a patch. But then they came back and said, wait, this isn't really a vulnerability. And they revoked the CVE. And I think that the biggest problem I think we have right now is twofold, right? One, the LastPass thing and the move away from that. I mean, that's a big deal. It's gotten a lot of attention. That attention drives other people looking for attention. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like as a company, we look for attention because we sell stuff and we want people to think about us and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily bad, but the problem is if you combine the rush to get something out for attention and everything else like that with the problem that InfoSec has had forever. I've ranted about it on the show. I've ranted about it on stage. I've ranted about it in random buildings that people were willing to listen to me at. We very often don't actually think about the risk of what we're saying. Like, oh my God, this is awful. Well, yeah, it's awful if it's a third Tuesday of October and the attacker stands on their left leg while Mickey Mouse runs around in circles. What was it? The one that I always get a kick out of is the original Google Nest thing that people complained about, where if you had physical access to the Google Nest, if you could unmount it from the wall, if you could plug it into your machine, you could replace the firmware.
Of course.
And then potentially that firmware could do bad things. And it was just like, yes, so.
Right.
I don't care.
Devices you can't do that with?
Yeah. And I think this KeePass thing, and I think the other comments about password managers being under attack are true, because people are doing it to like, hey, there was cool stuff over here, let's keep looking. My brain says, and I specify my brain because we all know I have issues. I think we have two things we got to worry about. One, I think it's good that people are beating up on password managers. To me, this is like encryption. Well, okay, that sounds dumb. It is encryption. But
yeah,
if you're putting out a new encryption system, you should open source it. People should know how the math works. They should beat the heck out of it, because the sensitivity of what it's storing is important. Same thing with password managers, right? But having that in mind, we also have to ensure that we actually understand the risks we're talking about. And I think, I don't know if the KeePass developers are right, but reading what they say, I think they are, right? If I have to have access to the system to get there, the least of my concerns is what the person who has full access to my computer is doing with my unlocked password manager.
Right. Yeah, I think that's just I think it's got people upset in the cybersecurity community, though, is like, that's what we've always said, though, for pretty much every vulnerability that's like local, right? Like, as soon as they have access to your system, it's game over anyway, as the excuse for, well, you really don't have to fix it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's still a vulnerability.
But what I read, and this might be my understanding, right? But what I read was it was more than just if I have local access.
Okay.
I thought we still had to have a misconfigured setup that isn't the default. We had to have, like, there were, and if I'm wrong on that, and it's just they're saying, well, if you have local access, then I agree 100% with you. That's BS. It's not good. That's just an excuse.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I read it as there were 2 or 3 other things that had to be done. Kind of like, you know what? If I leave my keys on a park bench attached with a tag that gives my address, saying the excuse, well, I had a lock that isn't good enough. But
yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's the core question is, are there caveats? Yeah, they say here that development team warns that this type of config file only applies to the KeePass program in the same directory, and the attacker can work around it by using a KeePass executable launched from another folder. So, yeah, I think there's some weird stuff going on with this. But
if KeePass is just giving the issues, if they have local access, then KeePass is wrong, and they need to fix the problem.
Right.
But
yep. So we will see. I mean, more and more, I think just like any event, right, that happens, we see this, Scott, you see this all the time with phishing, right? When there's a major world event, there's, look at all the phishing emails that come out and all the different scams. Yeah. You talk about the things that are in the news and things like that. And I think password managers now is just another one of those events, right, that people are attackers trying to capitalize on. Something to be aware of.
For sure.
All right, so let's jump into Aware Much.
You know that's some people have a white noise machine.
Yeah.
I've actually recorded the way you say Aware Much, and I just have it played on a loop as I'm going to bed because I love it so much.
I'm really
there's just
sorry.
Something about the way you say it.
That's kind of scares
peaceful.
me a bit, Kevin, that my voice helps you sleep.
Yeah, totally.
I'm just trying to imagine what that would be like. It's pretty creepy.
Pretty scary, actually. I'm trying not to imagine it.
Okay, fine.
To be honest,
it's creepy. Yeah. There's a
So,
temporary restraining order being issued.
So I will introduce this
Why don't you
segment,
introduce it, Tom?
And I will get Scott's comments on this because so there's this organization, Dr. Webb. I know that sounds really shady. I think they're like a
foot
weird
medication thing.
Yeah, something like that, right? But they're in
Burt's
security
Bees.
apparently. But they had found that 3 health tracking apps that are pretty popular in the Google Play Store download over 20 million times, so that's a lot of downloads. They all seem to communicate on the same back end, which is interesting. But they're those apps that force you to watch ads, right, to get like rewards. So for these health apps, like you go work out, go on a run or something, you get like so many points, and then you can trade those in for rewards and so on. They found that you're not really getting the rewards. You're just kind of forced to watch more ads, which is kind of,
we forgot to give you the rewards.
Yeah.
Sorry.
With kind of duping you into, potentially giving away information too. Right. But they also found that there are more and more apps that are disguised as regular apps, like these investment apps or games. And they actually redirect people to phishing sites to collect your information. So this has been, going back to Google, right? Google has lots of problems with malvertising, like we talked about, but also developers always squeaking in, and malicious developers, and they are finding ways to create apps that are malicious intent but disguised as legitimate applications. So, Scott, what type of advice do you have for people to kind of combat this?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously I would recommend using reputable apps, right? If you're just doing a search for any fitness app or rewards kinds of apps and stuff like that, you might have some trouble. I was just actually looking at the image from the article we're talking about. It's actually not high enough resolution to see what the reputation is for the apps that they did screenshots for, but it doesn't. I can't tell. It might have millions of good reviews, but that would be unusual, I guess, for an app that has behavior like this.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think it's just staying on guard, right? Especially with ads and those apps that you're constantly seeing ads being shoved in your face all the time. I think that's a red flag, right?
Something to be aware. Sure. I mean, it's ad based marketing. You can create any kind of an app. The flashlight app and the weather apps, and they're just loaded with ads. So those are things we sort of get used to. But if you're relying on it for something of value other than what you were just looking at the time, and so reward points is something that you can pretty easily motivate people with. So when they're if you haven't checked out whether or not they actually provide the rewards, you might want to do that as a test after you've done a few iterations. Say, can I actually use these rewards?
Yeah, and the other thing too, Scott, I think you talk about phishing and how to not become a victim of phishing. I mean, this applies in the mobile world as well, right? So just because you could be a victim of a phishing attack through a mobile app just as much as you can by clicking a link on an email. Right.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, that's where it all comes down to the reputation of the app itself, or if the app might be vulnerable to being hacked and abused, by an attacker. But yeah, it's either a reputation or vulnerability, or just, maybe I think sometimes we've seen apps taken over by, like after they expire or taken down, and then somebody else comes along and claims it. Kind of like, does that ever happen? I seem to remember.
Yeah.
People have taken over, expired apps, or
we also have seen where they'll actually buy it from the developer. Like,
right.
Hey, your app is popular. Let us take this over and do this. I think it really boils down to, we've talked about this many times before, and I know Scott, y'all and Click Armor really try to hammer this home, is that it's not just enough to say, oh, it's in the Google Play Store, it's in the App Store, it's whatever. Mm-hmm. That you do have to do some level of due diligence on what you're installing and downloading. And that is harder for many people because there is an assumption, there is a general implication that, well, it made it to the Play Store, so it must be okay.
It's vetted, and
yeah. And people misunderstand what that vetting is. And the other side of this is, I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to that they're like, oh yeah, but there's nothing important on my phone. People still in 2023 talk about their phones as if there's some flip phone that they can text.
I have nothing to hide.
Yeah,
I don't care if somebody has my phone.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I'm an open book. You want to know stuff about me? I'll tell you, and that does not mean I want malware on my phone.
Wrong answer. That's right. All right. Well, let's jump to our last story. Kevin's going to love this one. This is Meta's Account Center came with a two-factor authentication defeating bug. Say it isn't so.
Of course it's so.
Say it isn't so. So a security researcher, I'm not going to pronounce his name, but he found a way to bypass two-factor authentication by brute force guessing a 6-digit authentication code. So this essentially could turn off 2FA on somebody's account if the attacker knows the victim's phone number used for 2FA, and then they could link that to their own account.
It's actually kind of funny to me how like the key thing here that I found so funny was, okay, so I have an account, I have two-factor turned on, SMS two-factor is what was vulnerable to this.
Right.
If you know my phone number, which by the way, my phone number is published everywhere.
All over the internet. Yes.
So knowing my phone number is easy. You go and create an account with Meta and you say your phone number is mine. It doesn't matter that my phone number is already attached to my account. They'll just, here, and they'll hand it over.
You go.
And I get some of the reasoning for that is, people lose their number and other people pick it up and,
of course,
and stuff like that. So I get the reasoning, but then you have the second part. Okay, so you add my phone number to your account, which by the way removes the phone number from my account, which the implication there is now my account is no longer protected by SMS two-factor because the number's been moved. So you can now brute force that account possibly, but then when you add it, they say, okay, we sent you a code. Please type it in here. And that entry was what was vulnerable to brute force. It wasn't brute forcing the other person's account, whatever like that. You're literally moving that number over, right? And then you're getting into it that way. And that was the part that I found interesting. Was, it allowed you to duplicate a number and then didn't have any type of rate limiting or.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I did research. This was back in 2009, around the time that we spoke at DEF CON. And I remember I could brute force Facebook logins all day long. They never had any rate limiting just in the login page. Yeah. And it was actually not on the main web login page. It was only through the mobile app. Right. So that was something specific to that. But yeah, you could spend all day just trying passwords and nothing would happen. You never get blocked or anything. Yeah.
That is a common and what we find is we're doing testing. Tom, I'm sure your team finds the same thing.
All the time.
Testing that we have pushed developers to understand that authentication at the front door is really important to be secure, but they lose track of those other places it's used and the number of times that we've seen. Okay. You can log in over here, but it's not the front door, so we don't do 2FA there. Or like in this case where we can duplicate a number and go there. It's interesting.
Or sometimes the recovery process is not as secure as it should be.
Yep. Yeah, totally.
That's right.
And that is less of a concern when it's an account to a system. But in something like this, where we're moving so many things to single sign-on, a single account management system, whatever, it now all of a sudden you start running into the problem where, okay, that one vulnerability in that one aspect now just exposed 30% of your systems or 80% of your accounts to this, right? Whatever that is, right? that it becomes even more critical to do security assessments and tests and this is not an ad, but move your testing further left into the SDLC, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. So thank you both to my both award-winning co-hosts and myself. I'm going to thank myself for being on that list too, because Kevin's going to make me. So that is a humble thank you to myself.
I'm awesome.
If you didn't read between the lines, yes. But thank you both again, and thank you to all of you for listening and supporting the podcast. We greatly appreciate it. I love seeing the download numbers go up and the YouTube channel subscriptions increase. Thank you so much for all of that, and we will talk to all of you again next week. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, hit that like and subscribe button. To catch all the latest from the show, visit our website, sharedsecurity.net, follow us on Twitter at SharedSec, and join our Reddit community on the Shared Security Show subreddit.